IVM.
Welcome to Think Fast, where this week I'm going to talk about the fact that my book is out. Let me just show where's my merch? I'm wearing merch, people.
Varun is wearing a little black t-shirt.
Which says everything is out of syllabus on it. There are going to be multiple t-shirts, there are notebooks, there's even a mug.
Oh my God.
And stickers and lots of other fun stuff.
Wow, look at you.
Along with the book. I'm doing a merch line now. What's
Appreciate
happening with
the confidence, Varun. Appreciate the confidence. I love the way you have just assumed कि भाई मैं तो फोड़ लूँगा. And you've gone the 9 yards.
People will buy my stuff. Otherwise, worst case, I will just buy it and gift it to people. I'm looking at it this way.
Which is how your book reached number 1 in pre-orders in any case. Let's clarify that. But apart from your books, this week has been pretty I think this union budget created quite a furor on Twitter.
Yes.
And a lot of tech bros were busy giving their lousy hot takes on the union budget 2022, which was fascinating to watch. I don't know if you saw this, but dude, Facebook's parent Meta platform has seen a major decline in their profits. And their stock actually plunged by about 20%. So basically $175 billion worth of
the Metaverse is
value
not
creation.
Working?
Apparently, dude. There seemed to be a little, couple of tremors in the Zuckerberg sort of universe. And then actually, what's interesting is it's not just Facebook or Meta. A lot of tech stocks are down. But I think the thing that's obviously worrying in Facebook's case is Alphabet, which is their major competitor. They seem to be cruising. In fact, I think their stock went up by about 7%. After their last sort of earnings call. So. That happened. I don't know if you saw this, but NIIF, which is India's sovereign wealth fund, invested in FirstCry, and SoftBank and a couple of others have offloaded their stake in a secondary deal of about 240 million, which is interesting. H&M, by the way, is all set to launch home in India.
Yeah.
Ikea has competition. Do you think?
I think the home, the home market better than I do, but I've been to an H&M home store abroad. But, it depends on how much people go to it. I think Ikea is still such a large name. I don't know if they'll really get into this as much. But if you go to buy a t-shirt and you end up buying a couch, you never know. Buy my t-shirt instead.
Of course. Yes, guys, please buy Varun's little black t-shirt. No, but, actually what's interesting is it's not just H&M, even Zara has been taking their home fairly seriously. They've at least been investing in a lot of content. So it's interesting to see all of these companies that were, prima facie really known for their fashion, now taking their home, selection and assortment more seriously. Do you think IKEA will ever get into apparel?
That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? Because I think this cross-connection of saying, okay, somebody's getting into my turf, how easy is it for me to get into their turf is something you're seeing across the board. So this could be interesting. But speaking of H&M and Zara in the home front, their stuff is really interesting. I don't think it will compete with IKEA because very different, just from the style of stuff there. So it might actually I would say go against some of the more local ones that we have, which are a little more flashy. Because Zara is extremely flashy if you look at the home care stuff.
Yeah. And actually, I think what's interesting is, this could become a short segment, but I think what's interesting is IKEA's focus has always been furniture. It seems like Zara and H&M are going more in the accents and, decorative items piece, but maybe more on that in another episode. M&A action continues with the Gupshup acquiring cloud communication company Nolarity, which is interesting. Gupshup sort of, was a major breakout company last year. I think they, really jumped on the accelerator through the course of COVID, got into the unicorn club. They've been in business for a while. I know topic we guys are going to talk about, hopefully at some point, is people getting cancelled. And guess who got cancelled this week or a couple of days ago? Who would have thunk? The most uncancelable.
And I'm not trying to sound ageist. I'm not trying to be ageist here, but I think at a certain age, you need to start considering having a person on air, because I think a lot of people, as they get older, and that might not even be that old, it can be my age, you might start saying a lot of random stuff while you're being recorded. So
Varun finally knows how I feel, being 31 and having him near 40.
How many months to go? How many months to go before you say it? How many months to go?
6.5 months to go till Varun
Yes.
turns 40 and becomes like Whoopi Goldberg and gets
Yes.
cancelled. No, but her cancellation thing was a little like silly. I mean, it was a very like, it was a very like random. In any case, I don't want to get cancelled. So I'm going to stop talking about her getting cancelled. Metaverse also, by the way, is feeling the heat. I think, a lot of the conversations around Metaverse was, can you take human stupidity out of the Metaverse, right? And unfortunately, there have been a couple of cases of sexual assault happening to, IRL is bad enough, but there was this recent case, I'm going to, read this out. Nina Jane Patel has come forward with her experiences of her avatar being sexually assaulted by 3 to 4 male avatars with male voices. This, she recounted, happened in Meta's venue. So there's all kinds of, it's just like, Metaverse is not taking away.
I don't know if you
human
noticed that
grossness.
Instagram has launched avatars, which you can actually have now. It's only in a couple of countries, not in India yet, but you can create your own avatar and that becomes a part of Instagram as well. So I guess safety is going to be a priority no matter what we do. Like anywhere, however we try to like really guard this, safety is always going to be a problem and the problem is the volume of people that are on these platforms. How do you really control that? And I feel the people even looking at safety require so much. Like if you look at all the stuff that came out about Facebook, like people just like regulating stuff, we're going through so much mentally as well. So it's a very tricky slope.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is.
And we'll find out, I suppose. But I think that covers top highlights from the past week, man.
Yes. Apart from the fact that there's one last thing. My book just came out and I have merch dropping very soon. Okay, I'll stop plugging the book. That joke is, that thing is only like can be stretched that far. But I think also like we should definitely talk about the budget, which I know we will as we get along with this. boAt's filing in their IPO and it looks like it's going to be massive. Morning Context did a nice article on it, so I know we're going to dig into that as well. And what else we're talking about?
We're talking about your competition. Don't pretend to not remember it.
I don't call it competition. So here's a point which I have, and I read this somewhere recently, which I actually
I touched
think
a nerve. Oh my God, I touched a nerve. Somebody's tingling.
I read this somewhere recently, and I thought that's actually an interesting way to put it.
Is that a fire burning, or are you just jealous, Varun? Are you just jealous?
No, I think Ankur's awesome. Yeah, I like Ankur, someone like I've spoken to multiple times, and he's awesome. So we're going to talk about Ankur Warikoo and the whole monetization on the creator side. But coming to my point, if you're all working towards a certain kind of content, you are not competitors, you are teammates because you're all working towards the same goal, is how I like to look at it.
But let's take a break, guys, and we'll be back with more jokes on Varun and our Think Fast segment.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Suchita. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcasts website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're going to think fast now in our Think Fast segment. But just as a side note, I was not blushing. My light is orange in front of me, which is my front light. That's why it was like that. I really like Ankur and Tanmay and everybody else. I think everyone's doing an awesome job. We're building the creator economy together. I think there is no competition. We're all friends.
We want world peace. But let's get
into... I'm going to be recording a podcast with him soon, though. That episode will be out on my other podcast soon. So that might be a fun listen.
Lovely. Now, if you're done plugging your podcast and your book, Varun, can we get to the Think Fast segment?
Yes. So my first question to you, just to explain to anybody who's not heard this podcast before, if not, why have you not? And you should really go back and listen to past episodes. There's lots for you to learn. We throw a bunch of news at each other and we dig for reactions. We try to be fast. We're never fast. We just digress like how I'm talking right now. So going to the first question. Wordle got acquired by the New York Times. And you saw the tweet? You saw the tweet by the founder?
Yep. I think it's great, man. One, it's a great home for Wordle. Second, I can only imagine how exhausted that poor chap must have been getting. Something that he started for his...
what just happened?
Seriously, dude. But super fun game. I'm glad it's still caught on and is still trendy. But superb acquisition, by the New York Times and a good home for Wordle as well. I might add that. Just one quick fact, by the way, about the New York Times. They beat their prediction thingamajig for their number of subscribers. So they actually beat expectations. And I think now they're inching close to about 10 million subscribers, which has been off of the back of a lot of their newer acquisitions. So New York Times is really on a roll. But speaking of on a roll, my question for you, Varun, is Tanmay Bhatt the Kunal Shah of creators with his rampant angel investing left, right, and center? It's not that rampant, but you get the question.
But I think that's an interesting one. Right? If you look at creators who are in angel investing, Tanmay is actually one of the first people to really get into it. And I think he also got into it because he spent so much time in Bangalore and really has like kind of spent time consulting with a lot of startups. And a lot of cap tables now are opening up to saying, okay, I want to put a little bit aside just for creators. Seems to be almost a resounding thing that I have. And Tanmay is obviously like one of the prime people you would want, right? Especially the work he's done with Cred, all the background he has across his content, etc. So it makes sense for him to do this. Also kind of shows that creators are not just looking at, okay, how can I make money from brands, but looking, saying, okay, when can I actually like own equity and kind of build for the long term? So, and he's also a super smart person. So I guess what he's doing is smart. And also Kunal and he are good friends. So the parallel is quite interesting.
Yep.
My next one to you is going to be about this entire thing with Spotify and Joe Rogan. Neil Young left Spotify because of misinformation on Joe Rogan's podcast. Then Joni Mitchell left. Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters might be leaving is what I'm 100% sure. A couple of really tiny artists also left who were like, I think there's one polka singer who left as well. Brené Brown, who is Oprah's therapist, who runs a really popular podcast and has a bunch of really great books. She stopped her podcast, which was Spotify exclusive. She's not putting any new episodes out because of this. Spotify gave a statement which was saying, okay, we'll add a disclaimer, we'll be more careful about this. But I think if you've seen it, Joe Rogan put a video out, which is a 10-minute video. I call it a super classy video because I think he was very on the ball. He spoke about the fact that he does take responsibility for this and he's going to have more diverse voices in place. He didn't say he won't have all kinds of voices, but his point is I want to get everyone's perspective. He's not a journalist. This thing obviously has blown up and all that stuff. But what do you think of this entire piece? Like parallel of like our podcasters, journalists now that you have to have that responsibility is a point he made. So what is your perspective on the whole Joe Rogan Spotify thing?
So I think, a podcast I would actually encourage our listeners to listen to is this excellent recent episode on Honestly with Barry Weiss, which is a podcast I've recommended in the past. And she is in conversation with this Yale professor, Amy, I am forgetting her last name, but she basically wrote that book called Tiger Mom. Where she basically spoke about like the parenting style of like Asian immigrant and Chinese parents largely, and she got cancelled like back in 2010 2011. But this podcast is amazing because it's basically in conversation with a Yale law professor, and she talks about how one like semi-psychotic the West, especially America, has become when it comes to anything which is remotely like off correct parlance or like off, general liberal narratives. I've actually heard the episodes that, got Joe Rogan into trouble. And I think, if you hear them, he's not taking any sides, and actually neither are the people who he's interviewing. So no one is really taking sides. They're just giving you their perspective on like research and data that they've done. And it's not like he's got some jackass on his, episode.
Yeah, those are all like legitimate people.
Exactly. So I think somewhere, like people just really need to chill out a little bit with opinions and opining and this general obsession with like, if you are not doing XYZ, then, you are a bigot and you are a misogynist and you are right wing. That said, I think, where Spotify needs to become a little better is if they're buying rights or like if they're buying all of these, podcasters, etc. At the end of the day, they're becoming a publisher at some level. And whether they like it or not, with, great power and with great publishers comes great responsibility, right? So I think am I upset at Joe Rogan? No, not really. I think he's doing what, he needs to do. But I think I'm not surprised by the backlash that Spotify is getting, because at the end of the day, they've paid this guy to run a show, on their platform versus him just being like, another like you and me who our listeners are listening to, on Spotify. So I think burden lies with Spotify, but the controversy generally, I mean, just hear the episodes, guys. It's not.
And I'm still stuck on this point is that what you just said earlier is that if you don't listen to the entire episode, you're just getting a small clip and you don't miss the nuance. I think the whole point of a podcast is you're getting the nuance of a long conversation. And I know that clips do really well, and that's one of the main things that podcasts should do to market and all that stuff. But I feel that nuance is what gets missed in especially conversations like this. What he should get called out for is like stuff when he makes like stupid statements about, I don't understand the difference between white and black and how they're different shades, which is the recent Jordan Peterson episode. But that's what he should get called out for. This part, I don't think as much. And if you are a person who can listen to Joe Rogan and decide if you want to take a vaccine or not, then even if he gets taken off Spotify, you will find that content somewhere else.
Yeah, no, 100%. But switching gears, and my question for you is, LVMH has posted a record increase in sales and profits, up actually higher than pre-COVID years. So Varun, what is up with this like luxury growth in the COVID eras, and who would have really expected this would happen?
I actually don't understand that entirely, because I'm just thinking about how they're selling more, right? I mean, either the fact is people are sitting at home and just like shopping online and saying, I want to buy more things, I'm anyway sitting at home. But it's interesting that I would have imagined the luxury segment would have actually gone down a lot because people aren't
in them. Remember we spoke about like cars, Rolls Royce and Mercedes having blockbuster years. So it's like anything, not anything, but like a lot of luxury has generally skyrocketed. I
guess people have decided that they just want to buy stuff which they've always wanted to buy, and why wait when things like this are happening around. I don't know. I mean, it might be interesting to dig into this and understand where this is coming from. It might be good to get someone who understands luxury marketing. Maybe get a perspective from that on the show. That could be an interesting add-on as a guest.
Yes.
Moving on to my next question, and as always, my last question is a slight extension of, or rather, a really long-winded way to talk about a creator who's not from India. There's a creator called Airrack. Just for context, within 1 year, he built 1 million subscribers by basically hacking a format that has worked really well for larger creators. Basically, it's a whole dare thing, right? He's daring himself to do X, daring himself to do Y. That content did really well. He even talks about the fact that he hacked that audience in by just plainly just following that format. He just raised $3 million for a YouTuber academy that he's launching. And that's legitimate money, right? I mean, this is a guy who I'm just looking through my notes. He just literally between a year or ago, went to like 1 million, and now he's launching this and getting funding in. This whole creators building businesses piece, especially someone like so nascent. What do you think about it?
You know, I mean, it's not just him, like NAS Academy and, Nussair, Yassin, and what he was able to do. I mean, obviously his round was, closer to about 10, 11 million, and he had, the likes of like Lightspeed back him. I think this is just one of those, scenarios where creator knows best. I feel like the problem that he's solving for, right? So he's raised money essentially to launch a film school, if I'm not mistaken, targeting YouTubers. I mean, the opportunity is massive, man. You ask a kid today what they want to become, no one wants to. They either want to become like Elon Musk or they want to become a YouTuber, right? So I think the opportunity that he's tapping into is interesting, and that he's been able to create proof through his own meteoric growth. Who better to test out the waters than someone like him?
And he also raised it from a bunch of creators as well. So Casey Neistat, Colin, Samir, etc. Also, this is the same guy, Airrack. The video of his which I really watched was, he went and stranded himself on a deserted island. He said, I'll sit there with nothing till I hit 1 million subscribers.
Wow.
He hit 1 million. So he actually hits it by that mark. And there's an entire video of that. It's so raw. It's like watching Castaway, but this guy just wants to get subscribers.
So
it's like, and so which means that he understands the audience, understands the spin. So it's like, it makes sense for someone to fund him. So, okay, if you can do this, then maybe you can kind of sell people how to do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. To the short conversation we had about Tanmay as well, I think it's good to see creators diversify the way they are. Okay, this Think Fast has been a long fast. So my last question for you is Surge's super hit, sets of companies so far. So for those who are uninitiated, Surge is Sequoia's, sort of like program incubator accelerator of sorts, targeting specifically early stage companies. They've had multiple batches of Surge, but a recent tweet posted by Mr. Harsh Upadhyay from Ntracker basically spoke about how a bunch of companies have crossed the 100 million valuation. So Scalar has hit 710 million, Khata Book 600 million, Class Plus 200 million, Kutum 170 million, Trell 120 million, Doubtnut 120 million, etc., etc. It's it's obviously been led by Rajan Anandan, who's a stalwart, a phenomenal and very well-respected angel investor. So what is your take on a program like Surge really crushing it in record time? And 2 years, what they've been able to do is unbelievable.
It also kind of shows that, I guess, how you kind of work with companies matters so much more than just the money kind of going in. And I'm gathering they also got a lot of push from there. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have deeper understanding of how Surge functioned, but I'm guessing that mentorship and that really helped, that push to get them towards this, ramping up, product, everything else. I think that would have played a long part in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So actually, because it's associated with Sequoia, they get a lot of, top Sequoia founders to really mentor and work very closely with Surge founders.
Almost a Y Combinator equivalent in that sense of the word, right? If you look at it, like what Y Combinator has been able to do.
Exactly. But for like a smaller batch of people enrolling into Sequoia. So really, really kick-ass job there. Time for a break after a very long fast.
This is a long fast segment, and we'll be right back after a break where we will talk about the person who Suchita wants to troll me over. Mr. Ankur Warikoo. We'll be right back with Think Fast.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcasts website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're getting into our double tap segment or double click segment, as we call it. I didn't forget. I came up with the name last episode. I'm going to stick to that name. Double tapping, double clicking. We'll decide which one that is. Why don't you let us know if you watch this clickbait segment? Wow, clickbait. And speaking of clickbait, what do you have for us in your first short segment?
Oh man, I am baiting you with this, Varun, given how orange you got less than 7
My
minutes
light is
ago.
orange. I can switch off that light. If anybody's watching this on YouTube, I can switch off that light right now.
Okay, but let's focus, guys. Focus, because this segment is going to be about Ankur Warikoo, and all things creator monetization. So I'm just going to start by setting some context. Ankur Warikoo has obviously, been a part of the startup ecosystem. He, was leading Groupon, sort of morphed Groupon into Nearby, raised a shit ton of money from Sequoia, then sold, Nearby to Paytm and sort of exited Paytm in 2018, 2019. And, of course, since 2019, he's been pushing out content on Instagram and YouTube. Very interesting, definitely not for me, short form videos on life and how to live better and manage your money and, what jobs to pick, this, that, and the other. I'm just going to give all of our listeners a quick lowdown on, first and foremost, how much he's earning. His income, by his own admission, as a creator, coach, and public speaker crossed 12 crores in the year 2021. Credit to a Money Control interview that he gave recently. His YouTube channel has 1.45 million subscribers, and all of this has been built, remember, in between 2019 to 21. He has about 300k odd followers on Twitter and over 1 million followers on Instagram. So man has really hit the jackpot. He's kind of positioning himself as like the Gary V of India of sorts. But before, we get into
calmer
what
Gary V, actually, maybe. He's not as hyper as
he's not
Gary
as high energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your take, man, Varun, on, your partner, competitor, whatever he may be?
So I've actually been following Ankur's creator journey, if you call it, over a long period of time, because even pre-YouTube, right? He was actually very active on LinkedIn early, I'd say like 2019, 2018. I actually had him on Advertising is Dead in 2020 before he started YouTube and all that a lot more seriously. So I remember at that point in time, his focus was that he was literally doing content from his desk in the nearby office, right? He was putting stuff out. So he's always done this. He's always tried to kind of put stuff out there that he's kind of learning and all that stuff. But he has a few verticals, which I've always realized that he really focuses on. One is that he'll focus on not just life, but he'll talk about the money around it, how you can kind of manage that better. You will focus on productivity. And he's obviously expanded on that over time. But I think the real change happened if you look at, let's say, June, July 2020 to now. So there was a point of time when he started to share, like he recently shared in a video, I think about last year, where he mapped out how he creates his content, like what team he has, etc. How he found the interns who work with him, how it's structured. The Excel, the Google sheet is out there for anyone to kind of use. And a lot of people have taken it because he's sharing a lot of this stuff. So what's been interesting with him is he built it into almost like a structure. He builds it like a startup. He calls it his startup, right? So I think the one interesting part is that he hasn't hired like a large team. He's got primarily a lot of people interns. He gives them a share of the profits they make. So everybody who works with him gets a share of the profit. So he's built it like a startup. As someone who knows how to run a business, he looked at it as a business and built it out. But the courses are a great example of saying that, he monetized through digital products, not just with brand deals. He gets a lot of affiliate, he says it openly as well that, a lot of affiliate stuff from Zerodha and InMoney and a bunch of others as well. He's gotten that over time. And I think it's mainly because you structure it like how you would content for a brand or a company. And then suddenly you put it into that machine. I think he's done a fabulous job really scaling it up. It's one year, and I think it's there's so much to learn from it.
No, absolutely. And I think, my like 3 sort of learnings from him, and before I get into that, even if you look at the way his content has changed, right? I think when he started out, he was trying to, he made it all about his failures, right? About how he, could make
failure
his company
go.
Correct. So he had, that whole shtick. I mean, I genuinely really appreciate it because I think, especially in the ecosystem where I spend all of my time, which is Indian startups, there aren't enough people who talk about how badly they can genuinely screw up. And I think that he was so vocal about it was refreshing. So I remember that was a early narrative, but then, how many times can you play that card over and over again, right? And I think over time, he sort of found his niche within 18 to 24-year-olds. This guy used to speak with like a bit of an American accent, at least, back in the day in the couple of interactions I've had with him. But now when you hear him on Instagram, he like breaks into Hindi, and his YouTube has like a Hindi translation of everything that's in English, given below. So I think somewhere he's kind of like, really rethunk who his like user is and what the demo is and what their, pain points or like life pain points are. Some of his content is like very questionable. I think he's trying to, make a whole thing out of this, like college education is, not the best, and why do you need to go to college and this, that and the other. So I think sometimes some of the things that he says end up being a little like problematic, and it's not because the thing he's saying it's problematic. It's the problem is it's communicated in a 15-second format. And if you're talking to impressionable like 18 to 24-year-olds, you don't know what of what you're saying they're actually internalizing. But I think that said, in the grander scheme of things, point number 1, right? I think he's generally a pretty good role model for 18 to 24-year-old men to have. And I say this because if you think about it, like I don't know who 18 to 24-year-olds look up to. It's not like there's anyone amazing in Bollywood. Neither are there the world's coolest, like, and most like, righteous cricketers that we've, sort of created or built. And of course, there are a couple of like startup founders, but each of them has had their own, issues, so to speak, associated with them. So I think generally as a role model, he's super sound. He gives credit to his family, he talks about his wife, he talks about his kids. He acknowledges parts of his life which you usually don't see a lot of other folks sort of, openly talk about. So I think as a role model, he's great, especially for kids who are sitting in, tier 2, tier 3 city and genuinely may not have much to look up to in and around them. I think the second thing that I really like about him, which you spoke about as well, is just how he's sort of about diversifying his revenue streams, right? And, from the get-go, whether it's doing brand deals, charging money for public speaking, or obviously his courses have been interesting. He also angel invests, I think, a little bit. I've seen his name pop up in a couple of places. So I think it's really awesome to see how much he's been able to diversify his monetization stack. And I really hope more creators take a cue from him, especially creators in lifestyle. I feel like these learning creators and fintech creators are like eons ahead of, your fashion bloggers and your beauty bloggers. They're somewhere still stuck in like 2008 way of monetizing. And
the problem there is that they don't know how to, and there's a reason for that is if you look at a lot of them, there are very few who can actually go on to become entrepreneurs in the way that it has to be done. If you look at, for instance, I think Anam just recently launched a beauty line, right? I think because she's also done that before and we spoke about it. So it makes sense for her to do, but a lot of them actually don't know how to do it, or rather they're still stuck in figuring out where they can go. And I think a lot of them are also gravitating towards, okay, maybe I'll act, maybe I'll get into acting in a series, etc. So I think the track of saying, are you going to become an artist or are you going to become an entrepreneur? It's easier for learning and finance creators to become, people who teach a course, etc. And do multiple courses. The other thing with Ankur, which is very interesting to look at, is that and he recently shared a video about how he almost doubled down on this early, I think 2020 or 21, where he was down to a certain amount of money and he really pushed through this whole piece, and public speaking and the courses are really where he was able to bounce back from. So I think it's important to share journeys so people can learn from that, and so you don't not getting into it, because my worry with hustle culture is that you say, okay, I'm only hustling. Here he talks about weaknesses, he talks about lows and highs.
But this is my problem with his content, right? Like, I think people forget that he was a very well-known founder.
I actually listened to that video, and I think what he says is that while a lot of his money was in nearby, so when he actually and when he left, so he didn't really have enough liquidity. Because all the liquidity had been put into nearby. The nuance of, okay, someone starting off today right out of college versus someone like him who has had a career is so different that
has a career, has
matters.
The connections, has the background. Also, please remember that he was funded by Sequoia, man. He would have been paying himself a decent amount of money. I'm sure Paytm paid him fairly well for the 2-3 years that he was at Paytm. So I think I really, really like the general point that he's making, and hence the appreciation towards what he does. But I think the Ankur Warikoo phenomena is super, super interesting, and I think there's so many things that creators can learn from him.
And I think the most important part to take from this is the fact that you can build so many streams of revenue if you look at being a creator as a business and not as just something you do for fun. It's nothing wrong with doing it for fun, but if you look at it as a serious business, structure it and build it like a business, like he's done. Speaking of business, the budget came out. Although we're not financial experts, I read the Economic Times every day. Little known fact about me, I read it every day, try to understand it, have tried to understand for years. I still don't understand most of it, but I still try. So I will give some nuanced points on the budget, but I want to ask you, did you have any nuanced points on the budget? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
You already heard my nuance. There was some, very interesting adjectives that I had used earlier on, which I'm not going to repeat for our listeners. But, honestly, obviously there were parts of the budget which were interesting, and I haven't read it. Like, I think this is the problem where, and why I feel a little uncomfortable opining on it, because even I have just heard, hot takes on the internet, or I've, obviously done my research and done my reading. I haven't literally physically read.
So let me run through a few main points.
So
let me run through a few main points. I think primarily, if you look at top level and not getting to nitty-gritties, normally in budgets, when you're seeing inflation, which is basically the cost of things kind of going up, governments tend to move towards a scenario of saying, okay, how do we kind of bring that down? Government's gone the other direction, saying, can I really hyper invest to really focus on growing the economy further? So they invested a lot in infrastructure. So lots of stuff for railways, roads and highways, lots of stuff towards clean energy. Highways especially got a massive boost over there and stuff like that. So that's actually been a big push there. Yeah. So they're really pushing, they're putting money in, saying, okay, man, we'll take that. It's a strong push in that front. The big one, though, was crypto, because there is now a 30% tax on any form of virtual digital asset, as they put it across. And on the other end, the government's going to launch the digital rupee, which is going to be a crypto equivalent of the rupee. So a physical rupee can be converted into a digital rupee in that sense. The crypto thing obviously went, like we mentioned earlier, Crypto Bros went nuts on Twitter because 30% tax. Because if you go to what Nirmala Sitharaman said in the press conference afterwards, she said, unless it's issued by the RBI, it's not a currency. It's an asset and it will be taxed like an asset. So government's taken obviously a stance to saying we're going to regulate this, which is not supposed to be a regulated asset because crypto by itself is decentralized. And there were a bunch of other stuff. I mean, a lot of the other stuff were more about how strong push to convert most things towards digital. So obviously there's your e-labs and digital university and e-content for education. So digital was a strong part of this budget, because most things they're trying to convert as many things to the digital ecosystem as possible. Even like mental health got a sign in the thing, they're doing something on the mental health front. It's not like a big deal from an effect point of view, but I just think the narrative of it being out there is a good sign. But no changes to income tax. And there were a few other smaller pieces I'm not getting into, but I think the big one which really got everyone's attention was the push towards digital a lot more, the entire crypto piece and the digital rupee, and of course, really driving in how much they're investing into it. Those were the ones that stood out for me.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things over here where, when analyzing a budget, I mean, logically speaking, one should really look at, last year and what was, sort of budgeted for last year, what have been the achievements versus, lack thereof this year. I think, and without enough, understanding of that, I think that the thing that I found baffling about the budget is our GDP growth rate has not been anywhere close to where we needed to be. There is unemployment through the roof, especially within this 22 to 35-year-old males living in rural India. So I think for me, the thing that I found a little confusing was where is addressing of these problems. I think that's why at some level I also get very exasperated by this, obsession with, oh bro, government said 30% taxation on crypto. I mean, from whatever I gathered, I think it was 3.5 minutes of her 90-minute speech. Yeah. She didn't give it that much real estate. So why are we giving it, so much real estate when genuinely there are bigger things plaguing this country, which is where are jobs going to come from? How are we going to grow our per capita income? I want to, make a big sort of caveat over here, which is I haven't read the documents and I feel like until we don't literally physically read the budget and what's been planned, it's difficult to, give a synopsis of what will or won't happen. But my hot take on the hot takes that I read across the board is obviously investors seem to be very happy. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala was, smiling from, year to year. Saurabh Mukherjee was also smiling from year to year in just generally their anticipation, with respect to the markets. You saw a big green light from the markets in general after, the finance minister sort of, run through the budget. So generally the market seemed to be very buoyant about, what she said, because basically what she said is sab changa hai bro.
And we're putting money into the system.
But what system? Dude, the only system that money is going into is infra, which is a great place to invest money. And it's the one...
I'm talking about markets. Primarily, markets always see where money is coming in. And in any time, if you look at it post any budget, you say you're putting money into infra, you say you're putting money into energy and transport, the markets always do well. Because those are almost foundational, right? And so that's why they react that way. So it's almost like it's a smart move to do that because they know that will give positive sentiment on a lot of fronts to really push towards these three things. Because obviously everybody, it affects everybody, right? Everything else like you said, crypto is for a few people, but this is for everybody. So just keeping that in mind, I think it was a smart one. My only 2 cents on the digital rupees, I'm it was bound to happen. There is no way governments aren't going to try and build their own currencies.
Also, guys, why are we forgetting this is the same government that did demonetization? If you think they are going to not want to track what cryptos you've got your head into, you are seriously delusional. You know what I mean? It's guys, why is any of this shocking to us? And you're totally right, which is it's great to hear them acknowledge all the right things, right? Clean energy, there was an acknowledgement on that. Mental health, there was an acknowledgement on that. 100%, they said all the right things, which I feel created all the right murmurs on let's just broadly say Twitter. But what I found a little underwhelming was dude, why are we pretending we're in a good place? Because that was my takeaway from it, which is
I think that's a fair assumption also, because end of the day, I guess that's controlling the narrative, right? And I think that's, as long as you can control the narrative and you can see something that is working eventually. I mean, see, the thing is also the budget doesn't decide how things run, elections decide how things run. So weirdly enough, everybody expected this to be a very election-driven budget. It wasn't
which
at all.
Which is good.
Which is interesting because they didn't do no SOPs, because a lot of their comments were okay, no special status and all this and that and all that stuff, right? So it was an interesting budget. I don't know, it didn't it went somewhere where it had a narrative to it, but like I mentioned, disclaimer at the beginning, we are not financial experts. We just read the Economic Times and a few Twitter bros.
Guys, not only am I not a financial expert, I'm not even an angel investor. So don't take anything I say seriously at all.
I have one tick on that box.
Yes, congratulations. On that note, let's take a break and come back with our deep dive for the week.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh, and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're talking about things that go into our ears and things that go onto your hands. I'm talking about boAt. Why am I talking this voice? I don't know. I'm just happy that I have merchandise which has my book's title on it. But before I stop, I do this again. We're going to deep dive. We're going to talk about boAt and its IPO filing. So, I mean, we said rumored a few weeks ago. It's now pretty much official. It's out there. What's your perspective on boAt as a brand and what do you think about the IPO?
You know, as a brand, I mean, just what they've been able to do is unbelievable, right? Like they got into the world's most competitive category, which is electronics. And not only competitive, right? Like you've literally got everyone from like Apple to Xiaomi, you know, as your competition. You're literally like fighting against the biggest bulls in the arena. So one, like electronics, it's not like they picked up a category where, you know, there is even any customer nuance. I think second is their branding is like on point. I think, you know, they are literally like the beta at scale of like, you know, wearables, right? Where they've just made their brand fun. They found really, really interesting talent to work with, you know, which I actually, interestingly enough, and I can't believe I'm plugging you again, and you're not plugging yourself this time around, but on that episode that you had with Aman on Advertising is Dead. Yeah. Super, super interesting selection of even the type of talent that they work with. And honestly, dude, look at their numbers, man. Like everything from their, you know, they're profitable, which is, you know, shocking given the general sort of lineup of, you know, tech stock that has hit the markets. All in all, I think great brand, very, very competitive space, and that they've managed to make headway over here. Goes to show that, you know, you got to give the founders the benefit of the doubt, right? They know how to really get into things and make a go of it. But you know the guy, you know Aman reasonably well, and you had him on his episode. So what's your take on boAt, man?
So, there's a great article when we want to read this Morning Context did on boAt. I think it gives a lot of interesting details. I didn't realize that the 5th largest wearable brand in the world, which is saying something like it's crazy because who are the others? There's Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, and Huawei. And then there's boAt, which is, if you look at the fact that it's in the top 5 is saying something. I've actually known Aman since boAt started because we used to work with them as an agency. I've also seen him through the years, got him on the podcast recently. The one thing that is interesting about them, I think you mentioned this when we spoke about Nykaa a while back. From day one, they focus on business fundamentals. We need to make profit. We are a business. So they were never going out there and randomly spending money. Every buck was spent to make sure that they were going to make money out of it. They were also very smart in, like, they figured out performance marketing using talent way before other brands did, right? So when they would put multiple talent together, it wasn't like, okay, I will just shoot an ad. They would shoot like 40, 50 pieces with one talent and spread it out across the board. So they were very smart in how they marketed. The brand was built around culture. If you look at it, they were in like all your T-series music videos had all people, like very like beats, right? So all music videos had people wearing. I remember there was a music video which had Shahid Kapoor in it, and it had like this huge boombox which was boAt branded, headphones with Kiara Advani, etc. So they went after talent. Interestingly, they plugged themselves into culture, and also great price point. Decent quality, and I say decent is because I'm not a person who buys anything which is high base. So it's very beats in the desi sense, right? Is that you have like high base in that sense. They've done some interesting partnerships. Our producer has nicely told us that they did a partnership with Marvel. And so all of that, and that's really what helped scale, is that they had so many varieties of products, great price point, also looked quite cool. Let's be honest. A lot of that stuff is flashy, but it looks really cool. And that did really well. And now they're really focusing on wearables from a smartwatch perspective, right? And they're number 2 in India. Noise is number 1 on that front.
Correct.
But the way they're scaling up, it's interesting to see where they can kind of go with this. But all in all, I think it's a great brand.
Yeah,
Like you said,
and to
foundationally,
think of
that's
their
what about it.
and to think of their origins, right, which I think was brought up in that Morning Context article. I didn't know this, but earlier their business was importing and distribution of House of Marley headphones.
Yeah.
And then they had like their
And
own
Aman
USB
used to actually
cables.
be the head of sales for JBL at a point of time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, how do you say it? Harman
Cardone, I think that's how he said.
Yeah, he worked there. And I actually have a question for you. So let me ask you my question before I get into my commentary. But what do you think was that inflection point? What do you think really you know what I mean? Like every brand can sort of get in through the door. But in your conversation with him, or, I think you guys, did you work on that account? No.
We used to help them create a lot of that content with talent who they signed on. So we would almost like every second month shoot a bunch of stuff for them. So we do like 2 days of shoot and shoot about 60 pieces of content for them in that.
Yeah.
Nobody else is doing that. We literally had to build it up as a model to be able to shoot so many things in 2 days. We used to actually call it the boAt model, and really eventually ended up selling that to a lot of other brands as well. But that's where it started, because Aman said, I want to get ROI on my money. I want this to be value driven and not just like, I'm not happy to get one big music video, one big film. That was never his focus, at least initially. And even now, he really looks at it that way. But I think the real thing for them is that if you had a lot of Indian brands for the longest time, but Indian brands are always value, like you'd buy them because they were cheaper. Some of them were even like named in a way that they were not like, I didn't know that a bunch of brands which I bought were Indian because they just had like international names. So you'd buy a cable, you'd buy a charger, you didn't really care. But from day one, boAt was very openly an Indian brand, but they connected it to culture. I think the whole culture lens is what really got them in. It's the fact that they got cricketers, they got talent, and not from a brand ambassador lens, right? They actually got the vibe, and they got into music and everything else. And that is where the shift happened, where boAt became so large. I remember there was a time when Aman had actually asked me to walk around the Glitch office and check how many people have boAt headphones. And I realized about 40% of the people in our office, of about 150 people at that point of time, were wearing boAt headphones, which I think is, and this is like what, 2019, 2018, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the interesting part, is they built it on culture. But I think also it goes back to one simple thing. They always made sure they made money. They were never bleeding money because they were spending so much on marketing. They were always very strong on performance. They were also very sorted on Amazon. They sold really smartly on Amazon, where I remember one of the early things I had heard when we started to work with them also was that of the top 10 headphones on Amazon, I think about 6 of them were boAt. It's like even like 2018, 2019. So there was obviously a focus to really be there. And now obviously they're available across the board. And I think the few things they'll have to address, which they are addressing, is that they've just moved trying to move manufacturing to India because they've always manufactured in China. I think that's going to be a big move for them. And how do they what are the categories can they go to? Can they go beyond, let's say, audio and watches?
Yeah.
Do they do TVs, for instance? Could they do other stuff? So I think that's really what we have to see and watch.
So I think what's interesting is, two things, right? Obviously, their, filing has come with with not just some, but with a significant amount of criticism. One point, like you correctly said, is how do you really compete with, China and Chinese manufacturers, right? And with, supply chain issues hitting anyone and everyone, including the likes of Peloton, where does boAt really stand in the grander sort of scheme of things? So basically, like, who's a Tim Cook at boAt, right? Who's really looking at, where my products are coming from? What is the pricing? How do I maximize my margins, especially in a category like electronics?
They've actually both been able to do that really well, though. That part they've actually been able to manage well, because the brand has kind of stayed where it's at. And I remember this point coming up earlier, and I was talking to him as well. And it's something which they helped like really figure out, because I think they both have experience with manufacturing. Both the CEO and Aman, who's the CMO, both co-founders. And I think that's really what has helped them through this.
Yeah. But the second criticism that comes up, obviously, is, to what extent can brand be your moat, right? So how do you really think about distribution as your moat? So, for example, I'm not entrenched enough in electronics as a category, but if I had to give you a corollary through the lens of, say, for instance, someone like a Bira, right? Now, what did Bira try doing, which, sort of sent them in a bit of a, whatever, like a let me figure things out phase, through 2019 to 2020, was they started doing random things like, going international and not really figuring out their supply, because for any category, right, after a point for you to get from like that 1,500 crore revenue to 10,000 crore revenue, which is really the path that these guys need to show to possible investors who may want to bid for their IPO. is what does your market expansion sort of plan look like, right? So, and I think over here, like boAt has an interesting opportunity to go both high and low. In fact, in a couple of articles, at least, what I was reading was there is an opportunity for them to go even cheaper for your, like tier 3, tier 4 kind of user. It may be even through another brand. It may not necessarily be branded as boAt. So let boAt play in the masstige sort of segment. And what's their play for high, right? Like what's their play for a slightly more discerning customer who will care about like bass on a pair of headphones or will care about like quality of sound, etc., or just longevity of product. How do you really tap into that? So I think what's interesting for boAt and it'd be interesting to see the path that they've carved out for themselves is what is really going to be their approach in going low as well as in going high, and how will they end up, over time, will they become a house of brands, right? Where they...
so they've actually launched a few. There's Misfit, which they launched, which was their trimmers and all that stuff, which is a separate brand. Yeah. So last year they acquired Tag, and that's actually what they might position as their premium, brand. So I think house of brands is where they'll have to go to be able to address and expand across all markets. It might make sense, I saw Misfit because some of them shared it, and I was like, that makes sense because they're not putting the trimmers, etc., under the boAt brand.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the only way to go.
Yeah, I think another question.
I would buy into that IPO though if I could.
I do think one last point over here is, obviously like the term D2C stands for direct to consumer. And I think that's where they are kind of like figuring their situation out because they're like legit actual direct to consumer business is, I think, trending at closer to about 3% of their overall volume. Which definitely needs to see some amount of growth for them to either get better commission structures from the Amazons, etc. of the world. Because one criticism even mentioned in the article was how they count too much on marketplaces to drive revenue for them. But I think a combination of that house of brands play and also enough money in the bank could lead to all sorts of interesting things for them.
I think that's totally valid. I think they'll have to kind of control where the transactions are happening, and also kind of make sure they retain this culture edge while building multiple brands. I think it's going to be an interesting time to see this. But end of the day, you top 5 in the world, entirely built out of India, like full props, and also you're on Shark Tank. So it's like, what else are you into, Aman, is what I was going to ask him. But he's fully focused on the business. I literally asked him, what else do you like to focus your time on? He said nothing. I just have too much going on, which I think it kind of shows.
Yeah.
It's time to take a break and come back for recommendations. We're almost done with the show this week.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Welcome back to Think Fast. This is the last segment. We do recommendations and we shoot the shit, is what I like to call it. But what do you like to call it? What is your recommendation?
My recommendation of the week is these two excellent articles in my favorite, The Hard Copy. We had Meeta Malhotra on as our first guest. So these two articles, ladies and gents, I am obsessed with all things branding, design, etc. And there's two articles called Rebrands of 2021, Part 1 and Part 2. And if you're someone who loves, tinkering on logo changes and, oh my God, why did they do this? And what was the thought? And what is the business alignment to design changes? You'll really enjoy these two articles. So if you're a logo junkie, a design junkie, check out these two articles in The Hard Copy. What about you, Varun?
My recommendation of the week is this podcast called Creative Elements, which talks about how creators do what they do. And they don't just go like YouTubers, etc. They go like podcast hosts, they go writers like James Clear has been on it. So it's a nice array of creators. They get into the process. It's interesting. Not all the great episodes are great, but if you find the right creator to kind of listen in on, there's lots to learn there. So Creative Elements is my recommendation for the week. And also,
can I plug myself in, by the way?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, please read the Economic Times for hot takes on hot takes. But oh my God, can I share something with all of you guys? I'm so excited. god! I have been on so many panels. I mean, I'm not humble bragging, but I genuinely have. But like this panel is unbelievable, guys. I'm going to be on a panel with Girish Mathrubhutam, who is the CEO and founder of Freshworks, and Mukesh Bansal, who's the co-founder and CEO of CureFit and the president at Tata Digital. And this is going to be moderated by none other than one of the three people I am semi-scared of, which is Rajanandan, who is also an angel investor. Wow, guys!
Wow, that's
Can
awesome.
you imagine? Imposter syndrome.
Good panel, well curated.
Very
well
good.
curated.
Yes,
Speaking of well curated, buy my book. It's out now.
Oh my God, guys. Enjoy spending
The only way this
290
stops is if my book becomes a bestseller which sells 1 million copies. Till then, I will wear these t-shirts and I will plug the
The
book.
only way this stops is when I tap on the Leave Studio button and all of this comes to an end. No, but this was fun, man. All the best for your book launch, Varun. I'm sure you will be number 2 and Ankur Warikoo will be number 1.
Yes. I'll be happily number 2 to Ankur's number 1. I actually bought his book, but that should be my recommendation for this week. My recommendation when you're watching on YouTube is I actually have Ankur's book. It's called Do a Big Shit. Read it. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Okay, before they digress any further and our producer and everybody else kind of kicks us off this feed, that's it for this week. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Toodles.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, good friend of the show, good friend of Cyrus and myself, Mangalam Mallu is on. He's the assistant editor and anchor at CNBC TV 18, and he and Cyrus discuss how the budget of 2022 affects us all. On This Round is on me. We flipped the script as Gauri is a guest on her own show. Check it out as Kavita Rajwade, my co-founder at IVM Podcasts, hosts this very special episode. On Misconduct, Raghavi and Nisha are joined by Priya Mirza. She's the host of the Longest Constitution podcast. They take a close look at the former Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi. On Audio Gyan, Kedar talks to Dr. Simin Patel. She's the co-founder of the Bombay Wala Historical Works. She talks about how she picks out the most interesting stories to showcase. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshav tells us the amazing transformation of the ravaged land of Purnapani. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also, please do tell a friend. It really does help us when you spread the word about our podcast. And I'd also like to ask you if you could rate or recommend wherever you listen to our podcast. And speaking of where you listen to this show, if you're on an Android phone, do check out our new Android app. We have a brand new app with a brand new listening experience. Definitely check it out. I think you will enjoy it. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Do you like true crime stories? Do you like to learn about the people behind some horrible, awful crimes? More specifically, women that may have committed these crimes. Actually, Indian criminals that are women? Then we'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Misconduct. My name is Raghavi. And I am Nisha. We cover themes like murder, dacoity, drug trafficking, financial fraud, kidnapping, and many more. You can catch us every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast.